Unnecessary intro song to totally waste your time. All right, let's talk about the woke right. I'm going to take a couple of twists and turns as I address this topic. You've no doubt heard it by now that anybody's listening to this little recording is, I hate to even call it a podcast. Podcast kind of implies that there are more than 5 people listening to it. But, so you've no doubt, if you're listening to this, you're either lurking me because you hate me, or you have been called woke right. That's pretty much the two camps that are probably listening to this recording. And if it's only one person that's listening, you might have a foot in both camps, as maybe I do too. Anyway, I've mentioned this before here, but I don't care about repeating myself. I'm part of this group, this Signal group, and I was invited to it by a person who was my Facebook friend, who I've never met, or I don't know if I've ever met. But it was kind of apparent that they were a fan of my artwork early on, which is how I gained most of my Facebook followers. And I've always enjoyed, I can't say I've always enjoyed, but I always thought that this guy was a flaming gay guy, but he had, weirdly, conservative politics, because he always liked and commented on my, first, it started out just defending Trump, and just defending conservatives in general against the attacks of being called Nazis, because, hey, I left Utah. I left my Mormon upbringing. I rebelled. I went against it. I talked a lot of shit about it. I overcorrected. But I never called them racists and Nazis and all that. My beef was just like, don't be so judgmental, man. Have a beer, bro. Just have a drink. Relax, yo. That was my stupid position. But, so this guy invited me, and I find inside this group another guy, a Facebook friend who I've never met in true life, but was also San Francisco based, that would make very well thought out posts about, any subject, whatever the subject was. In other words, he was another non-Trump hater, And so I go, okay, cool. I get into this group. These guys are mostly old friends. What I've surmised is it's a bunch of guys that are coders and hackers, and they belong to a hacking group from way back there. I remember reading about these types and phone freakers. They've been hacking all along, coding and hacking computers. So I'm like, that's totally not part of my world at all. So I thought, well, okay, what can it hurt to join a secret Signal group, I'll just sit by and lurk and see how these guys interact with each other. And since it's a boys group and a rebel group and a private group with disappearing messages that disappear after a week, people feel very free. It's locker room. So there's a lot of locker room talk, a lot of the N-word, a lot of racial epithets, all the words you're not supposed to use in polite public are used there simply for the fact that you can. That's the main reason. There's none of these people have any they don't seem to have any deep-seated ill will towards anybody. It's just a group. And the memes were better because, they're more like along the lines of 4chan memes that would get you banned on, or would have used to get you banned on Twitter. And on Facebook, you could be sharing this group. So that was fun. And half the memes that I ever shared on my Facebook wall, I was stealing from this group, right? So this guy that invited me, so there's a lot of talk in this group about Israel, as there is finally on X too. But, and it's totally unfiltered, just talking about how Israel's doing this and Israel's doing that. And certain people are saying it's the Jews, and the discussion of whether or not Israel and being Jewish, and the differences between being Jewish and being Semitic and being an Israeli and being a Judaist, Jews, when you say Jews, it all gets wrapped up into one thing usually. You know, for the rest of us, we don't have one word that describes us all. You know, when I say white Christian, there's also Mormons that are white Christians. You know, there's Baptists. There's not one that covers them all, but for whatever reason, this one group of people have gotten one word that encompasses nationality, race, and religion, philosophy, and every sect of it. It's stupid. It's not very functional, and who knows if it's by design or whatever, but it's very inconvenient and makes things very hard to discuss in public. Because as soon as you say anything, you're anti-Semitic. Anyway, so this group was free from that, even knowing that one of the members, the guy that invited me in, was at least half Jewish, you know? And he was really critical of Zionists and basic Jew stuff anyway, too, you know? It was a place you could talk freely about Israel. Believe it or not, that's just not... You still can't. And you can on Twitter if you're okay with being throttled and pushed into a dark hole anyway. They push you into a private group, whether you like it or not. You don't know you're in a private group, but if you're in those discussions on Twitter, you're mostly in a private group. People can get in, the door's open. It's not like the door's locked, you can get in, but you have to be directed there. They're certainly not going to direct you to it, and fair enough, fair enough. It's Elon's site. You can do what the fuck he wants with it. I don't give a shit. Same with Zuckerberg. When they lie and they pretend like it's something else, I'll call them on it, but it's still theirs, So anyway, when I got in there, the guy that invited me he was one of the main contributors. But then somewhere along the line, the Ukrainian war started, and at first he was vocal and blah, blah, blah. But then he just kind of became a guy that hardly contributed at all. Comes out at some point that he's in Ukraine and he's part of the war effort. He's working there somehow in some capacity. I assume it's computers or whatever. But his presence always has been there. Yes, you can talk freely, but you always know that there's one guy that's half Jewish in the group. And he's the guy that started the group. So everybody holds their tongue just a little bit. There's certain jokes you don't tell in mixed company. Everybody knows how that works, It's how gossip works. You don't talk shit about Sally the same way when she's standing there. You might razz her, but when she leaves, that's when that's when the truth comes out about Sally, So there's been that component too. And I've had a lot of Jewish friends in my whole life, dated a couple of Jewish women and it's always been this thing where they've approached me. I've never gone out looking for any specific type of people to be friends with. I've never thought, oh, there's a black person, I'm going to go make friends with a black person. Oh, there's a Jew, I'm going to go make friends with a Jew. Oh, there's a short person, I'm going to go make friends with a short person. I usually make friends with people that make me laugh and that end up in my orbit over and over again. You're funny, you're interesting, you're my people, you're my tribe, But persistence pays off with me, so a lot of people become my friend even though they don't tick those boxes. It's just they're persistent. They treat me like a friend, and they're like, oh, okay, I'll be your friend, whatever. Yes, I'll come over, I'll come to dinner. Yes, I'll go to the beach, or whatever. And so that's happened a lot with some of my Jewish friends, which is kind of weird. I have this kind of, if I stereotype my Jewish friends, with the exception of one, I will say that they are tenacious and they take a lot of abuse because I'm pretty abusive to people anyway. And if I don't really like them that much, in other words, they're not one of the people that I selected because they're funny and interesting, that they selected me, then I can be very sort of abusive, very frank with people. And there's a secret thing that's like hoping that this is a dysfunction of mine, but what happens is I hurt their feelings, they go away, I feel bad about hurting their feelings, I say I'm sorry, and then there's this impression that this friendship has strengthened because we've been through something, which actually creates more dysfunction. Anyway, that's super boring, but also part of this story. So, but anyway, the point of this group was to have a little safe space. And I've kind of always a little bit razzed these strangers in this group. They all mostly know each other. I don't know them. They know me from my public persona, but I don't know anything about them. And I've kind of razzed them about their safe space. But I'll be honest, a lot of them have such good chops that it's a little bit intimidating when a lot of people, if you're in a room with a bunch of people that speak a certain language that you don't speak, sometimes it's best to just shut the fuck up. And that's kind of the way that it's been for the most part in this group. I just kind of lurk and steal memes and every once in a while chime in when I have something to say, But I've appreciated that it feels like a safe space where you can say things and not really be judged. Anyway, so this guy, the guy that invites me, he ends up in Ukraine doing this other thing. And he just kind of checks out from talking about, the topics of the day always come up in this group. In this group, people give the takes that they wish they could give on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, but they don't want to get either punished by the company they work for or punished by the social media outlets or whatever. Because these guys are pretty smart, they just don't want any unnecessary blowback. And it's not that important to them to influence the rest of the world. They'd rather just let off steam with some friends. So there's a lot of stuff that's just boring to me. I don't want to hear about people's kinks. There's one guy in there that likes fucking feet, and you always have to deal with the fact that he's a foot fetishist. And everybody makes fun of him for that, which is fine. I guess that's how males bond with each other. But I just end up seeing too many fucking feet things. And I don't give a shit about feet things. Anyway, I go off on tangents. But I'm just kind of giving you an idea of what the group's like, But the discussion keeps coming up of the Ukrainian and the Russian war. And my position is simply this. It didn't used to be this, but as from 2016 on, it's been pretty clear to me, increasingly clear, that there is a real war globally against white people, and that's working. White people just aren't breeding, and I don't really care because I'm an individualist, but I also don't like that people are gaslighting, pretending things that are there aren't there. Like, I don't care if the world turns into a beige planet. I think nature probably wants everybody to interbreed and share their best traits and blah, blah, blah. That's probably what nature wants. I don't know. And that's fine. I don't care. Nature's going to do what nature's going to do. There's not much I can do to control it. But I also don't like being lied to and manipulated about things. And you can see a concerted effort to just bash on straight white men, especially. Straight white men, and if you're Christian, even worse. And even though I wasn't part of the Christian equation, I was raised that way, I opted out. But and at first I was like, it doesn't apply to me. But then I started realizing, you know what, fuck you people. Whether I'm still Christian or not by the books, I still know that you you consider me. It doesn't matter what I consider myself. You consider me to be that. So anyway, I started feeling comfortable about it. Defending or just calling bullshit on this racism. Anti-white racism is what we're seeing in the world all over the place. Nobody can deny it, So we're kind of getting up to this week's events. But there's still a little bit more to it. So a few months ago, one of the other guys in the group, who I didn't know, and who uses Greek letters to spell his name. It's a simple name. It's one of my brother's names, but I don't want to just get into the names here just because. But this guy starts talking about the Russian war, and I've always just felt like, look, the Russian and Ukraine thing, we shouldn't be part of it. As far as I'm concerned, I can't figure out why a Christian nation such as Ukraine and a Christian nation such as Russia are killing each other. And more importantly, it blows my mind that Russia, under communism, allowed so many non-Christians to rule over them and to basically create terrible conditions for them, which ended up in the deaths of millions of them. And when Zelensky became the president of Ukraine, a Jewish man leading a Christian nation, I thought, why? Why is this Jewish man the leader of a Christian nation? Makes no sense to me, especially when he's a gay twink actor, member of the chosen tribe, And let's just clarify a couple things too here. There's no such thing as Judeo-Christian, okay? Judeo and Christian are opposites. The Jews think Christ is burning in hell and they like it. And Christians think that the Jews will one day finally accept Jesus as the Messiah. That's the basic sticking point. Is Jesus the Messiah? Jews say no, fuck him, he's dead, burning in hell, boiling in, his own feces. That's the Jewish position on that. And the Christians are, thanks for taking care of his birthplace. He's going to come back there and every knee will bend. Anyway, it's just funny when they pretend they're on the same team. They're not. Jews and Christians aren't on the same team at all. They might share some overlapping values, but guess what? You share overlapping values with a turd. You share overlapping values with a lion and a flower and a bee and a fly. You share overlapping values with lots of things. It doesn't mean you're on their team, right? So that's cleared up. That's not anti-Semitic because Jewishness or the religion isn't genetic. Might be. I don't think so, though. My position is it's not. That if you look at your DNA or you look at a cell, you're not going to find the Torah. You're not going to find the Talmud. You're not going to find the Book of Mormon. You're not going to find the works of Buddha. You're just going to find people stuff, gushy cells and gloopy things that God or nature made. So I've always been like, look, I'm not buying this whole thing. I think the reason why people hate Russia, the reason why the world or the globalists hate Russia is because white and Christian, And all those states that are former Soviet states, most of them, not all, but most of them also have that in common. You look at all the blocks that used to be part of it. White, Christian, lots of blue eyes. Most of the blue eyes that exist in the world exist in that part of the world. Not in our part of the world, but in that part of the world. And so when the world hates that part of the world, and you see who is pushing the hatred towards that part of the world? Is it white Christians? Or who else is it? Who is it? And if Zelensky is the leader of Ukraine and he's sending these guys, it'd be one thing if he was saying, hey, I'm the Jewish leader of a white Christian nation and I'm leading them to a bunch of ice cream and a healthy diet and wonderful things and here you go and everybody's got a house and, isn't life wonderful for all the people that I lead? That would be one thing. But no, it's throwing them into a meat grinder in a brother war, which is I see it, The whole history of Ukraine and Russia, it's all pretty much the same place. The birthplace of Russia was basically Kiev, Rus. Rus, Russia, became Russia. And then if you look at an old map of the borders changing, there's an animated one where you can see it changing all over time and pushing back and forth. But you can see that they share that whole region, obviously, this isn't a surprise, but shares more culturally and genetically than they do have differences. So it is a brother war, right? It's a brother war. And that was the case. And there's one guy in the group just like, Putin is evil. This is kind of weird because most of the people in the group kind of take this position that the Ukraine war is bullshit and it was mostly fomented by the U.S. and NATO breaking agreements and the U.S. interfering in Donbass in 2014, staging a coup and a color revolution and just basically fucking up and interfering, Regime change, again, just another place. And, you look at pictures of Lindsey Graham and all the usual players just fucking shit up for their own gain, smiling and loving that they're creating a brother war over there while they count their money. Hunter Biden, it's all disgusting. Everything about the Ukraine situation is disgusting. Zelensky's disgusting, And I've always been like, look, if I was Putin, I would be like, no, we don't want NATO coming closer to our country. We told you, we're fine, just stay over there. But if you make Ukraine part of our thing, and then the whole thing with them persecuting Russians in Donbass and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the whole point was I've always just thought that Putin's position was rational. I just thought it's rational. There's nothing irrational. People try to, and the more people try to paint him as Satan or evil, I just think, okay, look, if you want to speak rationally about him, that's fine. Let's talk about the rationalities of brother wars and how brother wars started and how they've been going on since time began. You got them in the Appalachians. You got them everywhere. You got Family Feud. Hell, it's a TV show starring Richard Dawson. Family Feuds are nothing new, but it's never really couched in those terms. It's just couched in Putin's evil. He's evil. And one of the guys in this group was taking that stance. And it was kind of surprising to me. And this other guy, my favorite guy from the group, that I knew before that online, he's always posting nuanced, well thought out things. And we're both just kind of going, what the fuck? He's just calling us both, okay, boomers. No, what was it? No, he was the boomer. I don't remember. But all Russians are evil. I hope they all die. And anyway, I just kept arguing with him like, dude, come on, are you going to take a rational approach here or whatever? And so this guy, since he's part of the inner group, he's got admin privileges to the group. And he finally one day had a temper tantrum. He kicked me out of the group, kicked me. And then he left the group. He just had a real meltdown, And I had side conversations with other people in the group. But this is kind of a long story, I guess, but it's building to something. And but the original guy, the half Jew, added me back. I didn't ask anybody. I was kind of relieved to be part of it, to not be part of it anymore, because I didn't need to lurk that group. I wasn't getting, the memes kind of slowed down, too much fetish talk, So when I got kicked out, I was like, fine, whatever. It's gone. But I got added back, and like an idiot, I go back in. And months later, today, or whatever, the conversation starts back up. This guy hasn't let go of that fight, and he starts calling me a stupid idiot and whatever. My friend makes this long thing about the Russia-Ukraine thing, and we're both just asking him, why can't you just talk about anything rationally, And it turns out that this guy is also employed in the war effort, that somehow he's getting a paycheck to figure out how to help kill Russians. And the original guy made a big long post about how what I was expressing and what my other friend was expressing in this group were basically, he kind of waved it off like propaganda, like what Americans know about Ukraine. And then he went on this long screed about how it's obviously a wonderful place, lots of trad wives everywhere. This woman, look at this hot girl that I'm dating. She wakes me up with a blowjob every morning. And she was a beautiful Aryan-looking woman, And I didn't like the crass way he was describing it, but he was talking about how, and me and this other friend were saying, well, mostly the other guy was asking him detailed questions like, I don't get it. Do people like Zelensky or not? He goes, almost everybody likes Zelensky. And we ask him more about the demographics, and he goes, well, most of the guys here are hiding out. They can't do anything. The women are the educated ones, and the guys can't do anything. And he starts talking in a demeaning way about these guys who either are hiding from being conscripted, because if you go out on the streets, somebody might come pick you off and send you to the front lines to your certain death. Conscription's a real thing. So it's just like, wait a minute, what are you saying here? People are either happy and they support Zelensky, and they want to fight in the war, or they're not fighting in the war. So there's two descriptions going on. These are alcoholic men. He's describing that even before the war, most of the Ukrainian men are just like good for nothings. They drink too much, blah, blah, blah. They're not really religious. They're kind of derelicts. It's just like, okay. And remember, this is the half Jewish guy. So the other guy that's employed, that's been calling me, ultimately, me and my friend were taking the position, it's just like, this is a brother war, and it's a war against white people. That's my position. My position is that Zelensky is right now working on a Zionist project to throw as many white Christian men in the Ukrainian region into the meat grinder as he possibly can. And that doesn't answer for why Putin is actually doing it. I think Putin, anyway, that's my position. My position is that's what's happening, because that's what I see. Zelensky, and I see, and then to add insult to injury, or to emphasize the point, this friend who invited me in, this stranger, I guess, He's literally making that point. He is a Jew that moved to Ukraine, is fucking all their bitches and kind of bragging about it, like literally bragging about it, telling this group, you guys should come over here. And it reminded me exactly of the birthright stuff that my Jewish girlfriends would talk about, how they'd have all expenses paid trip to Israel, and Israel would propagandize them and pay them and show them a good time for a couple of weeks as a birthright thing. He was kind of doing that to this group, And the one guy, the crybaby that kicked me out of the group and whatever, I was egging him on, yesterday. I said, "You're going to kick me out of the group again? I don't give a shit. I don't know you people, so kick me out." But what this group has turned into, what it looked like, and what I suspect, call me paranoid, but there seems to be a cultural thing amongst people who are raised Jewish or in the Jewish culture, be it secular or religious, that when they see a rising star or an influence, they handle it, they manage it, they make friends with it, they come into your life. And because even with my Jewish friends that are still my Jewish friends, I feel like an awful lot of time of theirs is spent trying to convince me that Israel is great. First of all, I don't need to be convinced of that, Why are you running it's like, if I was a friend, it's like a multi-level marketing thing where you think somebody's your friend, but then they're trying to sell you a juicer and a vitamin program or Mormonism. They're trying to convert you, It just so happens with so many of my Jewish friends, it ends up being this thing where they're trying to sell me on their scheme, to which I can never really join. I can only like them and think it's cool. Oh, okay. I'll come to Ukraine. You'll show me a good time. And therefore, you're off the hook about destroying white Christians. And this guy, this so-called friend of mine, the way he talks about Ukraine just matches what I'm saying about. The doctrine of Judaism is that if you're one of the chosen tribe, you are the chosen tribe. You're a special princess, And the Goyim, me, you probably, I don't know. Hi to my Jewish friends that might be listening to this. But the tribe members are the chosen ones, and the rest of us, we're just stupid idiots, And we need to just accept the fact that the chosen tribe knows best, and they'll take care of us the best they can because we're their nice pets. They like us like I like my dog, but my dog doesn't have any choices. It can't leave. It can't drive the car. Been banned from driving, for her own good. Well, that's the way the Jewish religion, Judaism, thinks about the rest of the world. They preach, we love them. We're the stewards. We're just here to take care of you. That's why we represent the leadership all over, because, and I get that because the Mormons think that they're the Jews. So that's the exact kind of attitude I went around with on my Mormon mission. I have this special message. I'm a special servant of God. I have a special thing. The difference being is that we're trying to get people to join the club. We're not just running PR for the club. We're actually saying, no, please sign up, pay us 10% of your income, and get into heaven with us. Wear the same funny underwear as we do, and we'll all get to heaven together. Happy New Year. Wonderful. Merry Christmas, Jesus. All that stuff. But the Jews, that's not the way it works with Judaism. Judaism is mitochondrial, it's tribal. You either get it or you don't. There's lip services is paid. You can look up things with rabbis trying to explain how conversion really works. And, because conversion doesn't really work. You'll see a couple go, well, it's clerical, we can't really say. And it's not this thing where it's just wonderful. No, if you convert, you are fully. God sees it that way. You see it. It's more like, well, mathematically, we kind of got to let you, because how are we going to do it? We don't have the resources to test who has a drop of this blood and the conversions and, But the bottom line is the scripture is basically saying, no, Ivanka Trump, you're not a Jew. Your kids aren't Jews. We say they are, but no. God knows. Anyway, so woke right. in this group, the last place I thought I'd get called woke right was in this group, but that's what the conversation came down to. It's just like one the guy that was trying to rationalize his paycheck for helping to kill Russians was going, "Oh, so it's about just white Christianity? You mean what? That's all you care about? White identity, Christianity?" And I'm like going, "Well, let me ask you a question, because you see this woke right thing flying around, and so I bet he didn't call me white woke right, but essentially the same thing. Oh, so you care about your identity. He was trying to call me a racist, like everybody, like everywhere wants to call you racist as soon as they don't agree with what you say. As soon as you say, as soon as you object to them doing something for their race and their tribe, they call you a racist. Okay. Anyway, so, but I've been noticing this too. And on my Facebook wall, one of these girls that I know and I like, and she usually posts good stuff, she had this meme of Tucker Carlson and Rachel Maddow side by side, and it said woke left, woke right. Tucker Carlson, woke right. And I was just like, I sent her a message. She hasn't replied, but I was just like, are there any Jews on the woke right? Are there any black people on the woke right? Are there any Buddhists on the woke right? Are there any Japanese people on the woke right? Koreans? Huh? Or is the woke right all white Christians? And if it is, why don't you just say white Christians? Why don't you just, again, like the left, double down on the war against white Christians? I'd respect you more if you did that. Because the subversion and trying to pretend like it's this unique little problem. Oh, no, it's this unique problem. The woke right, we don't mean that. Really? Because it seems like you do. It seems like you're talking about white Christians. Not just all white people, but specifically white Christians. And again, I'm not even your typical white Christian. But I know when I'm being targeted, and if you don't defend yourself, and if you don't defend the other people, if you allow a long campaign to ruin anybody on the world, but especially if it's your own family, it's kind of crazy. Now, I can hear some of you saying, well, why are you getting conscripted into war? I thought you were an individualist and blah, blah, blah. And I am. I'm a radical individualist. But that's my definition of myself. That's not their definition. When they say woke right, they mean me. They mean me. They mean they're if I got to fight for me, because they're coming for us, for the white Christians. And I don't know how it could be any clearer. It is totally clear. Is Candace Owens part of the woke right? I don't think they call her part of the woke right. Maybe. Okay, so maybe. Let's just say maybe, because they call her a white supremacist. So let's just say there are a few people that get put onto the woke right that aren't white. Let's just call them Christians. Maybe it's just Christians. Maybe it is just a purely religious thing. Seems more like white Christians to me, because, Catholic Charities are certainly importing a lot of brown Catholics, and brown Catholics, how do you call them woke right? Because the whole idea is it's got to be identitarian, So they mean white Christians. That's what they mean. Woke right is white Christians. And it sucks that we have to talk about these things. It does. I wish that everywhere I looked, I couldn't find. And let's just talk about the Sydney Sweeney thing, right? All of a sudden, within a week, 2 ad campaigns come out that feature white genes, white genetics, white eugenics. One was Sydney Sweeney. The other one was a Dunkin' Donuts ad, tan guy. It's almost like they picked that too. Like, we got to have a white girl and a white. I'm not saying they coordinate, but it's kind of crazy that you don't have any white genetics commercials at all. The woke right rises. The conversation changes. Israel happens, the bombing of Iran. And suddenly you get these two ad campaigns, one more popular than the other, but two ad campaigns that specifically talk about great white genetics, right? And everybody immediately defends, like, oh, woke is dead, okay. And there's this fight, and you see TikTokers going, I can't believe it, it's Nazis, it's Nazism, it's Nazi propaganda, blah, blah, blah. And you see white people defending it, like, what's wrong with that? Everybody else can be black and proud, and Mexicans, viva la raza, and everybody can do this. And, and there's this defensive thing. And I made a post, I just said, isn't it interesting? Because who owns American Eagle? A Jewish guy. Who owns Dunkin' Donuts? Oh, a Jewish guy. It's almost as if they want brown people to be talking about white supremacy and Nazism and blonde hair and blue eyes and how white Christians are evil. It's almost as if did they not expect that? Is somebody going to tell me that they didn't expect that? I have great genes, blue eyes, blonde hair. They wanted that. And nobody's talking about the Jewish part of it. Nobody's talking about that the owners of those companies are Jewish people, and they caused a fight. They started a fight. And that brings me back to the discussion about Ukraine and Russia. My friend, air quotes, that's in Russia, he doesn't go to the front lines because he's American and he's working on the computers. And the other guy that was banning me and throwing a temper tantrum, I sent him a voice message today on the thing. I said, look, I don't know you. I don't want to meet you. I have no skin in this game, but it seems to me that you're wrestling with your conscience, that you have to believe that Putin and Russians are evil in order to do your job and collect a check to help murder them. I can't help you I can't have a rational conversation with you because I can see how you would need to do that in order to sleep. But I don't have that problem. I'm not part of a system where I'm trying to kill anybody. Right? But anyway, again, that's another thing where he's not even Jewish. But he was recruited. And I've watched the Jewish guy that invited me in this group trying to recruit these other people to Ukraine. And that's over and over again. You see Israel starting wars that they don't fight, that they conscript somebody else to fight. We're going to get Russia to kill all these white people. And if you look at the history, and you look at the Greater Israel Project, and you look at the history of that region, and the conflict between the Christians and the Jews, the Goyim and the Jews, the chosen tribe and everybody else. You look at Tucker's interview with Putin. Putin's definitely trying to point you in that direction. He's talking about how he went to Ukraine when he was a kid, and you see all the people with the funny hats. Funny hats? What funny hats? Oh, interesting. Okay. Globalism is, to me, in my estimation, from what I can tell, just another rebranding of Judaism. As are parts of Marxism and parts of internationalism and parts of communism. And people go, how could you say that? They're conflicting things and blah, blah, blah. And communism is the opposite of capitalism. Yeah, but in all these situations, in the globalism, what it ultimately means is that the world will be dominated by the chosen tribe. It doesn't matter what political system it is. Could be communism, could be capitalism, could be Marxism, could be monarchism, could be any ism. But the important part is that the chosen tribe sits on top of that. Oh, Merkel, you're anti-Semitic, anti-Semitic. It's not genetic. At least I don't think it is. Because I do have Jewish friends that have opted out from all the bullshit. And so it seems to me. So they say, and so the evidence says. They are not the ones that are, there are some of them that aren't doing that. They aren't capitalizing. They aren't doing the Jewish meme. You saw that video of the guy, you know, the guy's saying, Chaim, this is my house. Why are you stealing my house? I didn't do this. If I don't take it, somebody else will take it. Why are you talking to me about it? You know, if I don't take your house, you still have to go. So why are you upsetting me? That's this guy that invited me to this group. That's what he's doing in Ukraine right now. I didn't start it, but I'm going to come here and fuck all their bitches, you know, and talk about how it's okay with a coldness. That's the part that just blew my mind. And that's why the world is kind of having their minds blown about Gaza. I fucking can't stand Islam, okay? I can't stand Judaism. I just can't stand either one of them, you know? But it's remarkable to me how one group can just sit by and almost with glee, enjoy the atrocities that are going on in Gaza, you know? Like I said, I try to ignore it as much as I possibly can because I try to not interrupt my enemies when they're killing each other, you know? Just let them go, you know? It's horrific. It's horrific that the children have to be involved, but I literally am not going to lace up my boots and fight over there. So I'm not going to make some big political grandstand because I'm not going to go fight that war. You know, I'm not going to. I think it's more important to stay focused on what is important to me. And honestly, as much as I explain my way out of Christianity and turn it into some kind of other thing about how it's reality, God is reality, and blah, blah, blah. You've heard me give the speeches before. But ultimately, it is a version of Christianity. Christianity comes very, very close to my version of how I think the world is deciphered via good and evil. What's good, what is, and what is evil. Christianity comes closest to that. You know, it's the one religion of the big three that doesn't allow deception of everybody else. You know, in the Jewish religion, it's specifically allowed to lie to non-Jews for advantage. You know, and in Islam, it's again specifically allowed to lie to the infidel, to trick them. That is not allowed in the Christianity that I was raised with. You had to have the honor. If there is a loophole in there that Christ taught, I never heard about it. And I don't see it being exploited. Where everywhere else, especially with Judaism, you see the loophole. I mean, the idea that there's a religion built where the rabbis, the top people, are arguing for centuries in a book, in a series of books called the Talmud, about how to find the loopholes, how to trick God. That's what they could call Talmudery, how to trick God. Oh, he says we can't leave our houses on Sunday. Well, let's just run this little wire around all of Brooklyn, and we'll say that's our house. So we're not technically leaving, you know, as if you get to the pearly gates and God's there and he goes, well, Noah, guess what? You committed this sin, this sin, this sin, this sin, this sin, this sin, this sin. You robbed people. You charged them crazy interest rates. You weren't upfront. But listen, God, technically, if you look here, paragraph 4.7.8, well, technically, I did this, and as if God's going to go, you got me. Come on in, you. You know, if the basis of your religion is how to trick God out of getting, you know, the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law, that to me isn't a good religion. It's a bad one, a really bad one. So no, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm anti-Talmudic. I'm anti-rabbinical. These are ideologies. They aren't genetic. Nobody is born a rabbi. Nobody, not a single person, although they chop off that foreskin very quickly. They should stop that too. Barbaric, disgusting. Most of all, I'm just sick of not being able to talk about this. I'm sick of... I was thinking about this week too. I was trying to make an analogy, and I was reaching for an analogy between good and evil, and I went to Schindler's List. I went, what the fuck? Are you kidding me? How often in your life, when you're reaching for an analogy to describe good versus evil, do you reach for a movie that you watched produced by Jews about the Holocaust? You know? And it occurred to me, they replaced the Bible. They replaced Satan with Hitler and Jesus with all the Jews. That's the Holocaust program we've been fed since I was a kid. The movies, the literature, endless, over and over and over. Hitler, Hitler. Anytime evil was mentioned, it needed to be tied to Hitler, who was a white guy, by the way, and a Christian. You know, so we've been indoctrinated fully into denying and just forgetting about the Bible, you know, and the New Testament specifically. Instead, we reach for propaganda, Jewish propaganda, Judeo-Christian. Did you know that term hardly even existed before 2000 when the towers came down? I didn't know that either. You know, Holocaust, that term wasn't around until the 70s. My friends, there's a war against white people. You don't have to care about it. I'm not trying to get you to care about it. In fact, you probably shouldn't care about it. But reality is important. You can't change it. If you close your eyes, it doesn't go away. When you close your eyes, the sky doesn't go away. It's still there. Reality's still there. I'm saying, keep your eyes open. Have fun with it. Don't be mean to your Jewish friends, because nobody chooses their parents. You know, be nice, be friendly, but the only way of convincing people to drop terrible ideologies is to be able to speak about them frankly, openly, and honestly. You know, and when anybody screeches and calls you a racist or calls you something else or lies and projects something onto you that's not true, you need to calmly, if you can, and I know it's hard, to say, calm down, that's not what's going on here. Let me point out how this is a religion. This is not a gene, right? It's not a chromosome. It's not. It's a religion. And you can walk away from it. You can stop it. You can stop. You can stop trying to turn the world against white people. You can stop starting race wars, you know? Because once they start, it's easy to fight them. Because once you open that door and start comparing this group with that group, there's a lot to complain about. There is a lot to fucking complain about with all the different groups. You know, you pick one and I'll undress it and criticize any of the groups. I can do it. But the reason why it's sickening is because it turns everybody into a defensive person and trying to protect their own, you know? When you see somebody coming after you and your family, you're going to protect it. You have to. So when you see people starting fights, like fucking Kenny Montoya did to me and Bobby Anderson in 5th grade, you got to say, what I tried to do to Bobby Anderson, I said, Bobby, I didn't talk shit about you, okay? I didn't call you a fat loser. Kenny Montoya told me that you said shit about me too. But Kenny Montoya is trying to get us to fight. Bobby, don't throw the punch. Anyway, I had to push Bobby down, and he hit his head on a sprinkler, and he cried, and we both had to stay after school. And Kenny Montoya was not punished. Kenny, Unibrow, Montoya. By the way, most of my friends growing up were unibrows. Isn't that weird? I think it's weird. and they all stopped being unibrows in their late teens, in their early and late teens. They started out in elementary school. All of them had unibrows, and then they all discovered tweezers. Anyway, weird topic. I don't give a fuck. I'm just like, what is living if you can't acknowledge reality? If you have to go around and just pretend that things aren't happening that are happening, are you really a free person if you can't simply observe reality and report it and say what you see, acknowledge it? That's not freedom. If I can't do that, just come put a bullet through my head. I mean, don't do it, really. That's a figure of speech. Please don't put a bullet through my head. Give me time to escape. You set up your stupid communist government and I'll figure out a way to dig a tunnel. I'm going to figure out a way to be free, right? I'm just going to. And so bring it on if you want to. I'm going to have fun. But I am absolutely not going to sit here and fucking be gaslit and told that reality isn't what I see with my own fucking eyes. Anyway, that's enough of that. Thanks for listening. Unnecessary outro song to totally waste more